Okay. Whoa. Don't know what happened there. You stop that. That's gonna be it. Oh, they're stopping me. Hang on. Hang on. They knew what I was talking about. Isn't that funny? They knew what I was gonna be talking about. Of course, this never happens. Don't worry, we're not gonna stay here. Okay, I think we're back. Welcome, everybody. Okay. Sound checked. Video fixed for now. Welcome once again to this week's episode of the Average Intelligence Podcast. Hope everybody's having a good week. Probably not. The economy still kind of sucks, but it appears to be getting marginally better. But tonight we were supposed to do this. I think 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago. Yeah, but no, last week. And then you're in for another solo special. Sorry, not sorry. And I totally forgot to play the show intro. Just messing up tonight anyway. Pretend you didn't see this.
We choose to go to the moon, investigate, and do the other things.
Weird. Weird.
You know, someone said that frickin' Panera's Pepsis taste funny.
Better.
No, I mean,
What?
Okay, welcome to the Average Intelligence Podcast. As I was saying, we were supposed to do this episode idea last week, but because of family obligations, no hate whatsoever. Family comes first. Same with this week. So I'm just gonna fly solo on this one. But tonight we are talking about the Great Gaslight. Yes, yes, the thing that everyone knew for literal years, as you will see tonight, that the media kept insisting, and Democrats. The reason you roll your eyes every time at the end of that opener is because it's funny, and that's what this show is. But much like medicine, truth bombs are more easily swallowed when the experience is somewhat enjoyable. So we bring the laughs, or at least we try to bring the laughs. But as I was saying tonight, we're talking about the great gaslight that fooled, well, I'm not going to say it fooled no one, because it definitely fooled some people, or at least I don't, I honestly don't believe anybody actually bought it, though. I don't understand how you could. I know that people said they bought it. I suspect ulterior motives. However, um, like I said, today we're sort of pointing out, as we have done before on this show, the incredibly stark contrast between what the media was saying when Joe Biden was still running, still acting and running for president, and what everyone else literally saw on our television and phone screens. Literally everybody saw it. It always perplexes me, and this goes for Republicans too, honestly, but here in most recent history, it's been more of a Democrat sin, I guess. Um, it really it didn't start with Hillary Clinton, but that's when I first started to notice it, is these politicians and media personalities behave as though YouTube and smartphone videos that people can use anywhere in the world are not a thing. And they act as though that like hundreds of people aren't recording this in real time and posting the videos online because they will say things didn't happen or things were or were not said, and then there is literal video evidence that shows that exact thing happening, and still they cling. It's really perplexing to watch, but anyway, as I said, for years. They told us that Joe Biden was fine. He was sharp. He was on it. This was the best version of Biden. Yes, that was literally said by someone, and you will hear it tonight. I was perplexed. Honestly, turns out it was one of Biden's friends. I don't know how close they were. But so the first thing we're going to do is kind of discuss the early years. Now, something very interesting happened, though. I will say, um, something weird happened, though. So very early on, and again, you will see an example of this. Realistic, this actually goes back to when Biden was running for vice president. Back then, it was a little bit more like Biden was a loose cannon, not so much senile. But Biden's always been kind of a problematic political figure for various reasons, not least of which being the sniffing. But when he was running, even for his first term, we were being told how energetic, um, sharp, smart, capable he was. And to be fair, back then he was closer, but there were signs, right? But very early on in that first race, I'm sorry, take that back. Back in 2019, so no, I'm sorry. Yes, that would be. I'm having a Biden moment. Yes, during his presidential race back in 2019 were the beginnings of it, and then going into the 2020 election, which again, you will see this tonight because I firmly believe that video evidence is the greatest thing ever. People on the right were calling out Biden's cognitive problems back then, and the media scoffed at the idea. Scoffed, I say, that a man in his late 70s might be having mental slips every now and again. Uh, but specifically, your outfits like CNN, especially MSNBC and HLN, the obviously left leaning legacy media outlets, you know, were deflecting like ninjas on all this stuff. It's like, how can, in fact, they literally scoff at it on air. Like I said, they're hard to find now, which is why this isn't because, but I knew it was going to be a problem. I've started doing something though, because I learned my lesson with Kamala Harris. I have started to, when I see somebody political in any side, because I have a few Trump videos too that'll come out eventually when appropriate, where somebody political says something stupid. And I saved that video. I have one of Caroline Lovett that's actually quite funny. I'll probably throw that out when we talk about her eventually. And these are all public videos, right? These it's not like I don't have some like clandestine network of people taking secret. These are videos that are published on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, YouTube. They're on YouTube. Hey Sammy, I'm working. I'm working. Samwise the Space Cat wants to join the broadcast. But so I've started to save these so that when I do an episode like this, I can easily pull them up. Fair enough. It's not a straightforward search, partly because right now when you search, even if you're specifying between the years of 2020 to 2024, if you search anything involving Biden's health and Biden's mental faculties, it's all about the cancer diagnosis right now, and that makes sense from an SEO standpoint, but it's still very hard to find these clips. Not impossible, but there were some moments that I remember seeing that I couldn't find clips of, or not the full clip to which I would have liked to have shown, but we'll get into that. But just for some, I guess, print evidence, you had people such as John Harwood saying in 2022 on CNN, quote, the gears of his mind are working. That's an issue pushed by right wing media, but it's not correct. And then you also have Karine Jean Pierre, who might have been the worst offender of this whole thing, which, by the way, I learned very recently. She's no longer a Democrat, so she says, and she's writing a book now, now that she's no longer Biden's press secretary. But she is quoted during one of the press briefings in 2024. Quote, he is as sharp as ever, as I have known him to be in my engagement, in my experience with him. And such a conversation would be incomplete without Nancy Pelosi. who is quoted as saying in July of 2024, "It's about performance in a presidency. And this is a president who has delivered the strongest recovery in modern history." So that's not really so much to his mental faculties, but debatable. Kind of points to the gaslighting in general, because trust me, there was a lot more gaslighting going on in apart from Biden's mental state. In fact, our episode where we talked about a State of the Union was Biden's mental state of the union, which you can check out on our channel. But as I was, looking for clips, which I naively thought I was going to spend an hour or two hunting for clips, it took all day. Literally took all day. I did come across an older segment from an episode of The Young Turks in 2019, and I'm going to give credit where credit's due. The Young Turks are very left. They are very left. They are far left of Biden in almost every respect. Even they, okay, Cenk Uygur, however you pronounce it. I've heard different pronunciations. I believe it's Cenk Uygur. But Cenk, on the Young Turks and Anna Kasparian and other broadcasts, but in this specific one in 2019, is talking about how nobody can seriously believe that Biden doesn't have mental issues. Like cognitive issues is a better way to put it. Nobody in their right mind would believe that. And he rightly points out that there is video evidence that shows this stuff. This is all the way back in 2019 when the race was just back and during the primaries, even. Because, yeah, they pointed out an exchange where Biden basically had or seemed to have forgotten what he had just said a few minutes earlier, and another Democrat on the debate stage called him out on it. So, yeah, this is not new, but to give you just a small idea of what we are dealing with here in terms of what the media was saying, I put together a not so short video compilation. Might be slightly beating a dead horse here, but I think it's worth preserving this stuff and showcasing it just so you know that I am not talking out of my ass. So without further ado, here is the do.
Okay, Trump obviously trying to portray Biden as slow and aging every second he can, which is a surprising line of attack given that Biden is 76 and Trump will turn 73 on Friday. But Trump is trying to turn this into an issue for Biden only. And the idea of Trump questioning Biden's health may sound familiar if you watch Fox News.
Joe Biden's tired. He does not have the energy for this. He's not up for this challenge. They're already hiding him like they hit Hillary. They don't want him out there.
You start to go, we haven't seen Joe a lot.
Well,
maybe he's got some hidden health issues. He's always wearing an overcoat.
All right, I just want to say there are no known health issues. It's a baseless line of attack that worked for Trump in 2016, too.
First and foremost, I had no idea that Joe Biden ever suffered from a stutter. I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable.
You have
to watch somebody on stage
that's so amazing. It's so amazing to me
and try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were mocking his stutter.
Yeah,
I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline. I would think that somebody in the Trump family would be more sensitive to people who do not have medical licenses diagnosing politicians from afar. Plenty of people have diagnosed your father from afar, and I'm sure it offends you. Your father-in-law from afar. I'm sure it offends you. You don't have any standing to say.
I'm not diagnosing him. What I'm saying, Jake,
you just talked
is
about
that
a cognitive decline.
He works out 5 days a week or more. Man. The bottom line, honestly, is that we know a lot of detail about President Biden's health. And perhaps more importantly, given what all that information is, which is not alarming in any direction, perhaps more importantly, the thing that this means today is that we're back to having normal reports on a president's health. A president's health, I mean, because he's president, by definition, is not a private matter. We all get to know as a matter of, prying and also potentially national security, right? Presidents' health and their checkups and their annual physicals and all this stuff, it's basically public information. And it's just sort of nice to return to the system where we actually get to know. We get candid, detailed reports from a doctor who doesn't seem like a crazy person.
I mean, look, it can go both ways. I mean, first of all, on one hand, I've sat with him, I've interviewed him and spoke with him for even longer than the interview lasted at that one specific instance. And he's sharp, that goes without saying. That wasn't any concern that I had.
And the issue seems to be that they are watching him in public events and in some press conferences and are coming to this conclusion, many of them, that he's too old. So what I'm wondering is he behaving differently behind closed doors? Because we don't get to see that at all. And do you see, and when you interact with him privately, is there kind of a different sort of level of vigor that is perhaps not as visible when we're all seeing him publicly?
So let me just first say, and I was on the swing with him recently, right? He went to Wisconsin, he went to Michigan, he went to California, he went to Vegas, and he's going to go to Ohio later this week. And so he visited small businesses and he met with people on the road, obviously, and spent hours with them. So folks have seen him, and you all have seen him yourselves as you cover this president. And so you see him interact, you see him engage. And even when he was in Vegas, he took some questions that you all had, and that and answer. He tends to answer them in a light way, a funny way, and is sharp with his answers to some of you about that. And so, look, and he's also meeting with world leaders. He did that with the German chancellor. He's obviously going to do this today with King Abdullah. And I spoke already about my experience with him. And just to answer your question, I've spent countless hours with this president, whether in the Oval Office or on the road. And I have to say, he's sharp, he's engaged, he pushes us for information.
What is Biden's physician saying about the president's health?
Yeah, Jake, here is that letter that we have been waiting for from Dr. Kevin O'Connor. This is the president's physician. And I'm just going to tell you what the headline is. And it was something we expected, given what the president said earlier today, that everything had gone well. Dr. O'Connor saying that the president feels well and that this year's physical identified no new concerns. He also goes on to say that he continues to be fit for duty and fully executes all of his responsibilities without any exemptions or accommodations. And you know that there have been some discussions and questions raised about whether it would be fitting for the president to take a cognitive test. And we just learned from the White House that the president decided not to do that, or rather his doctors decided that that wasn't necessary. This is what Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters just a few minutes ago on why they made that decision. Take a listen.
The president's doctor has said, if you look at what this president, the president who is also the commander-in-chief, he passes a cognitive test every day, as he moves from one topic to another topic, understanding the granular level of these topics.
As I think you were just talking about, no mention of a cognitive exam and an explicit sort of note that if it was needed, the neurologist who did see President Biden would have recommended that exam be done, but that was not the case today.
We've had some discussions over the past few days with your press secretary about the question of health exams, and you said you take a cognitive test every day in this job. Are you open to taking another physical or test before the election? Governor Whitmer of Michigan, for instance, said it wouldn't hurt to take a test.
Well, look, two things. One, I've taken 3 significant and intense neurological exams by a neurologist. In each case, as recently as February. And they say I'm in good shape, okay? Although I do have a little problem with my left foot because it's not as sensitive because I broke my foot and didn't wear the boot. But I'm good. I'm tested every single day about my neurological capacity to do decisions I make every day. You talk to my staff, all of you talk to my staff. Sometimes my staff talks a lot. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you have them telling you that all the major ideas we've undertaken haven't been in part initiated by me. I remember when the staff and I said, I'm going to go to South Korea, we're going to get the chip. What are you doing? I'm going to get Japan and Korea back together again after essentially having hostilities toward one another since the end of World War II. I'm going to move and see that we can expand. You know, the only thing age does is help you with, creates a little bit of wisdom if you pay attention. And so the point I'm making is, I think it's important that if the neurologist tells me he thinks I need another exam, and by the way, I've laid every bit of the record out, hadn't hidden a thing. You ought to ask Trump for his, okay? I laid it all out. And every single day I'm surrounded by good docs. If they think there's a problem, I promise you, or even if they don't think it's a problem, they think I should have a neurological exam again, I'll do it. But no one's suggesting that to me now.
As a former prosecutor, do you take the special counsel report this year?
I'm glad you asked. Listen, I have been privileged and proud to serve as Vice President of the United States with Joe Biden as President of the United States. And what I saw of that report last night, I believe is, as a former prosecutor, the comments that were made by that prosecutor, gratuitous, inaccurate, and inappropriate. So the way that the president's demeanor in that report was characterized could not be more wrong on the facts and clearly politically motivated, gratuitous. And so I will say that when it comes to the role and responsibility of a prosecutor in a situation like that, we should expect that there would be a higher level of integrity than what we saw.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
This is a man who is sharp, who is on top of his game, who knows what's going on.
This guy's tough. He's smart. He's on his game.
His mental acuity is great.
This is a very sharp president.
This is a man that's on his game.
President Biden is absolutely fit.
There's not a problem.
He's sharp. He's fit. He's always answering questions.
He is on the ball. He was sharper than anyone I've spoken to.
There's no doubt in my mind that the president is mentally fit for office.
Biden has proven himself to have a strong memory.
He's completely mentally sharp.
He's at the top of his game.
Now, he's cogent. But I undersold him when I said he was cogent. He's far beyond cogent. In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been. Intellectually, analytically, because he's been around for 50 years. Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second, and I've known him for years.
You were asking me about a cognitive test. As it relates to that, look, you know, the president doesn't need a cognitive test. That is not my assessment. That is not my assessment. That is the assessment of the president's doctor. That is also the assessment of the neurologist, who has also made that assessment as well. And, you know, and you've heard us say this, and I'll reiterate this, the president's doctor has said, if you look at what this president, the president who is also the commander-in-chief, he passes a cognitive test every day, as he moves from one topic to another topic, understanding the granular level of these topics. You saw him talk about fighting crime today. Tomorrow he's going to go to the border. Next week he's going to give a State of the Union address. And so we have to keep that in mind. This is a very rigorous job, and the president has been able to do this job every day for the past 3 years.
There's such a challenge for the Biden team, because as I've said here on the show over the past couple weeks, I've spent a good bit of time with Joe Biden. I've spent a couple of hours with Joe Biden, sitting, talking, going around the world as far as talking issues, talking the economy, talking inflation. And I must say, when I was talking to him, my thought wasn't, oh, poor guy. My thought was, oh, my God, I wish Dr. Brzezinski were on the other side of the table right now, because these two guys, 50 years of experience. And Joe Biden hasn't forgotten it. He may get pissed off at a press conference, and he may be thinking about the Mexican border deal and say Mexico instead of Egypt. He knows what he's talking about. He circles back around, gets to Egypt. He might misplace a word here and there, but you talk to him for hours at a time. Is he slower? Does he move slower? Yeah, he's moved slower. Is he stiffer? Yeah, he's moved stiffer. Does he have trouble walking sometimes? Yeah, so did FDR. We got out of the Depression. We wanted GD war. I will gladly debate anybody, anytime, any place, anywhere over the issue of whether Joe Biden has been the most effective president in passing bipartisan legislation, in expanding NATO, and responding to the rising threat coming from China.
When I saw the president give his speech the day after the debate, North Carolina, 20-minute speech, that was the sharp, strong Joe Biden that I had grown accustomed to covering here. I ran most of that speech, a 20-minute speech. I might have run 19 minutes of it here that night.
Are you prepared to be commander-in-chief?
Yes, I am, if necessary. But Joe Biden is going to be fine.
So, yeah, that's an incredibly small snippet, over a 5-year period. Larry, sure, anytime. Happy to have you on. I do want to let you know, though, because I can understand how you would assume that I am a 100% Trump supporter based on what this particular podcast is. I am not. I'm very much a moderate, but this is literally just calling out the gaslighting that happened over a span of 5+ years. But hey, if you want to come on, absolutely. I will never shy away from a debate. Got to get back to my point. Yeah. So just a small snippet of the insistence. Now, I will admit that the reason, or at least the main reason, that this sort of narrative was really being talked about as much as it was because people on the right were bringing it up as a point of contention. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I think it's a fairly strong branch to stand on, is that even if Biden had not been sort of slowly declining cognitively, they still would have, the Republican side of the aisle still would have brought it up as a talking point. In this particular case, they just so happened to be right. This kind of goes back into the Obama birther thing, like that people still bring that up, and that's put up or shut up. Like, it wasn't true. It wasn't accurate. You guys were wrong. You were making it up, or at least basing it off of a very, very dubious claim, and it was wrong. But Biden's cognition, they're a little bit more of a leg to stand on. But a lot of times, watching stuff like this can put you in a really foul mood, and our friends at the Spur of the Moment podcast can help pick you up.
So today's episode is sponsored by the Spur of the Moment podcast, everybody. Come join us every Saturday, and we're going to do this. We're going to sit here. We're going to talk about the news. Time to talk about Minecraft.
Okay.
It looks bad. So we're going to talk about movies. That new Joker movie is apparently terrible, and I want to see it so badly because I hear it's awful. We're going to make some jokes. We're going to have some laughs.
There's a lot of funny jokes in there. There's a lot of weird jokes in there. The Channing Tatum one will always make me laugh. Especially when you hear the behind the scenes stuff, like when you hear the behind the scenes story of how they just phoned them up.
We're occasionally going to have other people along for the ride.
A really fun fact though is I learned last year that that Coraline was Leica and not Disney.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I can see why you would make that mistake. Yeah. Because it does seem like it's a different. And to be fair,
that would be a horrifying, terrible Disney movie.
It would be because yeah. And we're just gonna have a generally good time. George, do you have anything else you want to say about our podcast? Make people watch it.
We watch movies. Sometimes we watch shows, but we always have fun.
Here
on the spur. 3, 2, 1. On the spur of the podcast moment.
Yeah, we nailed it. Nailed it.
Spur of
That's
the Moment
what.
podcast.
Yeah. It's Spur of the Moment podcast every Saturday. We nailed it.
You can expect awesome content like that.
We cut flawless promos every single week.
Their channel link is in the description if you want to check them out. Highly recommend subscribing to them. They are a fun couple of guys from the Great White North. Usually have really interesting perspective on things. But now that we've seen my sort of evidence that frankly we've been seeing for years, and now people are trying to deny it, Jake Tapper being among them. Now he's talking with his book, especially. He's like, oh, I saw it all along. Really? Well, you didn't. There was a literal video that we showed you of you basically shaming somebody for even bringing up the possibility that a man in his 70s might be just a smidge senile. But, and then, and I always get them mixed up. The younger Cuomo, the newsman Cuomo, he is now on a bit of an apology tour, has been for realistically since the debate. And you know which one I'm talking about. You'll see it later on in the show. Ever since the debate, he's kind of been on a bit of an apology tour. He's been on like a PVD podcast and, arguing from a really strange standpoint. It's like everybody else was right, but I was right at the time until I wasn't right anymore. It's weird watching him talk. And then of course you have Gavin Newsom, who started a podcast solely to appear less lefty. Like obvious gear up for a presidential run in 2028. Like I'll give credit's due. He's laying the groundwork early. Larry, if you are still here, I didn't mean to kind of cut off the thought, but we were getting to the ad spot. I love to have you come on and debate. We have, I mean, you can say whatever you want on this podcast, but we just have kind of a debate because nobody's ever actually come on to debate us yet. A lot of people have said they want to, and we invite them on, and they never come. So the only thing is, like, we'll actually debate, but once it devolves to a point of unconstructive, just name calling, that's when it just doesn't work. But you can find us on Instagram, shoot me a message there, and we can connect and we can have you on. Not next week because we're going to be doing our review of the Karate Kid Legends, but the week after that and on, we're open unless something just like hugely newsworthy happens. And even then, you can still join us and we can add the debate into it. But hit us up. I don't know why I did the 90s phone call. Old habits die hard, I guess. But yes, so we've seen like I said, in particular, Karine Jean-Pierre just vehemently sticking to this line. But unfortunately, reality came crashing down on that narrative. I mean, it was getting to the point where I can understand why they were afraid, and now people are coming out and saying that they were afraid to have Biden debate. They were afraid to have Biden out answering questions. They were afraid to have Biden on TV because you just didn't know if you and to be fair, because I gave credit where credit's due. Like if you go back and watch our State of the Union episode for Biden, I actually say in that I was like he was quite a bit sharper than I anticipated he was going to be. Granted, he kind of slid there at the end, but it was a long speech. So, and again, the man is basically 80. I think he's 80 now. I don't remember what his age is at the time. Oh no, at the time I think he was 80. I think he was 80 or 81 at the time, but I can't remember. I'm old too. But I did give credit where credit's due. But there were just so many times, and the nail in the coffin. And once again, I said this because we watched the debate live, we watched it happen in real time, and I think I even said, I don't remember exactly what I said, but something to the effect of he just, like, that's it. They can't deny it anymore. And I'm going to reference another episode we did a little bit later on, just hammering out all those points so that even you can understand that we've been saying this for years because we have eyes, okay? But some of the specific high-profile moments were where he was asking for someone who had passed away, strange comments out of nowhere, like, you ain't black, mixing up, which we'll see this clip a little bit later, mixing up the presidents of Egypt and Mexico. And I wanna stress this, right? Any one of these things on their own is not a big deal. I slip up occasionally. Everybody does. And like I don't even really hold too much stock in the falling down because people trip, right? And Donald Trump has fallen. I mean, there's some elements to it that do point to a little bit more of I don't even want to say senility, but just frailty mentally, i.e., the Roomba Biden is what it's kind of jokingly been called to. And this isn't again. I almost didn't want to play this compilation because it feels. I'm not intentionally putting it out here to be mean spirited, and I will fess up to the fact that I've had some fun at Biden's expense over the years. Is that the nicest thing in the world? No, I'll admit that, but it exists. It was put out there. They put him out there. Jill Biden is a horrible person because that's her husband. And she didn't tell them, no, don't do this. He's had enough. But here is just a small smattering of the moments that we all saw in the midst of the media and the White House claiming up, down, left, right, and center, particularly left, that Biden was just fine.
So today's episode is sponsored by.
In addition to that, we found ourselves in a situation where when he was president, he was separating babies from their mothers, putting them in cages, making sure the families were separated. That's not the right way to go. What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. It's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more border patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
Operations. Okay, get ready for this one. Will you stand with Joe Biden and...
I was a kid from suburbia. I lived out in Mayfield in a split-level home with my grandpop living with us and in a 3-bedroom home with 4 kids, my grandpop. And folks, when it's a whole 100 years ago, but I was a senior in high school, and Przicki turned out to be a great athlete at the University of Delaware, but I was runner-up in the state scoring championship here in football. I wasn't bad either. And but I wanted to get more involved. And I realized I lived in a neighborhood where I'd turn on the television and I'd see and listen to Dr. King and others. But I didn't know any black people. No, I really didn't. You didn't know any white people either. And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight and then watch the hair come back up again. They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches.
President Biden, something the special counsel said in his report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because, in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. That's
How
totally
bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your
my
memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine.
How much it means to me to have you swear me in today, and I thank you. And for me, this is the highest honor to be the 25th in confidence. We've got a lot of thanks to give out here.
Stack spaghetti sauce at a store and in a supermarket. You control the guy or the woman who brings out the carts on a forklift.
That's why I made it a priority my entire career to work closely with you. From the time I got to the Senate 180 years ago, you know, as well as my tenure as vice president, we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare, I think that, as you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side. I've been pushing really hard, really hard. God bless you all.
And Chancellor Farabee, thank you for joining us as well. And for families across the country.
That's just the tip of the iceberg. I literally got to a decision where it was like, I don't have enough time to compile everything. But particularly the debate. That one was because I will admit a handful of these you could maybe in a vacuum you could chalk up to possibly it being a joke, although his speech inflection suggests not, but I'm not an expert. And apparently Joe Biden had a stutter. I'd never heard that before, but maybe it's in the realm of possibility. So assuming that that's true and accurate, you could, you could chalk some of those up to a stutter. But there are some just undeniable, and they were more, is particularly in 2024. The closer we got to the race, the more this became an obvious thing. And the media still denied it until the moment on the debate stage where they could no longer, like I said, that was the nail in the coffin, right? And with Biden's recent cancer diagnosis, much like the lab leak theory, the people who had been talking about it for literal years are now being proven correct. And the mainstream media downplayed it, denied it, outright ignored it. And some of the people talking about it were called conspiracy theorists. Some were even as far as deplatformed. And I guess the overarching point is I'll use the comparison to the birther theory about Obama. When that happened, some people said, oh, he's not an American, he's ineligible to run. And a lot of people did dismiss it as ludicrous, but some people did say, okay, prove it. And when they couldn't come up with anything, they said, okay, shut up. And because Barack Obama is an American citizen, then and was born, I believe I can't remember if he was born in Hawaii or Kansas, but he was born in the United States. And he had a birth certificate to not like it was kind of silly that he had to prove it, but it was as simple as that, right? And I know anybody on the left who clicked on this video to rage watch is now very confused after hearing that. But that, I mean, I guess that's my point is the people on the right who were pointing out Biden's cognitive issues kept citing example after example, pointing to videos, showing videos, trying to get people to admit it, and they just wouldn't do it. So like I said, Biden's cancer diagnosis and Jake Tapper's book, which is interesting timing on when it was released, but just a quick excerpt from it. Jake Tapper's book, Original Sin, quote, The Times published is the source published in the book, quote, Biden showed signs of physical and cognitive decline before his 2024 re-election campaign. Obviously. And Karine Jean-Pierre, I mentioned this earlier, Karine Jean-Pierre announces, I believe this was yesterday or today, quote, I am no longer a Democrat. The Biden administration is broken. Well, the Biden administration doesn't, it's a thing of the past, so that's kind of an odd thing to say in 2025. But hey, which that's hilarious coming from her. And she's not the only one. Now, so many people, staffers, fellow Democrats, Democratic members of Congress. uh, There are people coming out of the woodwork that are now basically evacuating the Titanic, but it's too late, guys. If you had done this when the problems first started showing, there people would have respected you for it. Now it just seems like you're trying to save face because you are. And here's the thing, like I appreciate the truth, better late than never, but it's better on time. It's kind of like pizza. It's better late than never, but it's much better when it's on time. But this might be really, really making you upset, and maybe you just need some emotional catharsis. Well, fortunately, our friends in the band Again and Forever can provide you with said catharsis if you like metal. But they also need your help. So here's a quick word from them, and the link is in the description for you to help them for free.
The members of a so-called religious cult, with a leader they call Jesus, has had three of its followers arrested in the investigation of the murder of Sharon Tate and 6 others. Those arrested are 2 women and 1 man, and the Los Angeles police said they would ask murder indictments against several others. 5 women are being held as material witnesses.
So again, the second link in the description, you can help support our friends over at Again and Forever, Virus Fox, my co-host on Toon Talk 2.0, Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and their new single released, Chop Suey, reimagined from their new album coming out, Chronicles of a Serial Killer, The Last Supper reimagined. I've heard songs that haven't been released yet, and it's good. I like a lot. But as I alluded to earlier, the dissenters, the people who were calling this out, were once again, I compared it to the lab leak theory before, um, the people who were pointing out the truth early, especially from people who claim to be, harbingers of truth, the people who were trying to bring the truth out, or at the very least have a discussion about it to find out the truth, were not thanked, they were punished. Sometimes mildly, sometimes it was just in the form of being called a conspiracy theorist. But as Ben Shapiro pointed out with other people when he was testifying before Congress, I forget the name of the government body, but they won essentially, testifying that there was a large amount of bias towards more right-leaning sources from advertisers and well, not platforms that were sort of in cahoots with the bigger advertisers to try to de-emphasize their content and certainly wouldn't monetize them. And I said this at the time, it's not an advertiser's responsibility to fund a channel. It makes sense that they would want to advertise with people that they want to advertise with and would share their company's perceived values. What Shapiro and his ilk were pointing out was that this sort of advertising union basically blacklisted certain content creators so that even companies in that unit that wanted to advertise with them either couldn't or were heavily discouraged from doing so. Um, but yeah, and the thing is, even when you're called a conspiracy theorist, it can have negative effects because people don't take you seriously. Social media bans being counted as, or shadow banning even, which might be a little bit more harmful because then at least if you're banned outright, you know. If you're shadow banned, you don't know. A lot of YouTube videos being flagged or demonetized for misinformation. Um, and the irony is the number of people in the media now that are, I will give, some of them are coming clean and saying that they were wrong. And that's commendable. It's better than saying you were right all along and then having video evidence to the contrary. But as I alluded to earlier, I'm just going to point out we did an episode which was, I believe, I forget the title, but it was gaslighting. It was another solo special, actually. And this was shortly after the special counsel Robert Hur's report had been released. And it was what this was. It was an investigation to Joe Biden's handling of classified documents at his house, and uh, the the report, the special counsel did not call for charges, citing that quote his memory being sorry, I can't read my own writing. Quote, cited his memory as being less than admirable. And in that episode, we showcase how the report was politically damaging for Biden. This was before the debate, but I pointed out that what was even more damaging, and this is just the lunacy of the Democratic apparatus, not the voters, the Democratic Party, the people, the powers that be within the party. And this might have actually been Joe Biden, come to think of it. I don't think I've ever heard anybody definitively say whose idea this was. The same day that this report came out, that basically said Biden was simply a well-meaning, senile old man with a bad memory. Biden holds a press conference that evening to show that he's not a senile old man and proceeds to gaffe twice in terms of memory. That's the one where he mixed up the president of Mexico and Egypt. And there was a moment that was honestly very hard to watch where he couldn't remember the details. And I even hate that I'm talking about this because it feels gross. It feels icky. But he couldn't remember certain details regarding a rosary that they had gotten after his son had died, or some events talking about that, and he couldn't recall, so he just kind of did that whole anyway, and then segued into the next thought. And I'm just looking through. I had my AI assistant kind of paraphrase the main points of the episode. As I jokingly, apparently, I jokingly said that now it's official because there's been an official report Biden is senile. And one of the quotes as to why charges were not filed is, quote, Mr. Biden's decision to read notes nearly verbatim to ghostwriter Mark Zahner that Mr. Biden had identified as potentially classified cannot be justified, but the evidence does not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he intended to share classified information. Mr. Biden told Zitzer, I believe, I don't remember who Zitzer was, he was, quote, not sure the notebook passage he read was classified, and that is enough to create reasonable doubt as to whether Mr. Biden acted willfully. I cited a Newsweek article that reported Biden's poor memory was cited as a reason to avoid prosecutions. Hur wrote in his report that Biden's memory was significantly limited both during his recorded interviews with the ghostwriter in 2017 and in his interview with our offices in 2023. So this could potentially go well past, back in 2017. The report suggested that jurors would find the president to be, quote, a sympathetic figure at any potential trial. At trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview, with him as a, quote, sympathetic, well meaning elderly man with poor memory. The report concluded that based on our direct interactions with an observation of him, he is someone for whom many jurors will want to identify reasonable doubt. I basically alluded to the fact that that press conference that Biden held was kind of like watching an SNL skit about Gerald Ford, the infamous SNL skit that Chevy Chase did about Gerald Ford. But this was real life because Gerald Ford fell one time, and it's a gag that has been repeated by people who haven't even seen the original skit. Because I remember there's an episode in season 1 of that '70s show where Gerald Ford comes to Point Place and they do the gag where he falls down 3 times. He fell down once, guys. During the press conference, Biden claimed documents in his home were, quote, under lock and key in a file cabinet. which the report contradicted by describing them as being, quote, in a broken box in your garage next to dog food and a dog crate and a dog bed. The host quotes Biden phrase, "Come on, man." And yeah, I did say in that episode that Biden was basically, I mean, he was basically pardoned. He was let off the hook, and he's not even taking the win. Take the win, bro. But that, to be fair, had he done that, that would have ruined his campaign. But as I also said in the episode, he would go on to ruin his campaign. And the closing thought I had of this episode was as much of it's not funny because it's true. And I still feel this way, especially about the debate. It was painful to watch. It really was. I feel bad for the guy. I still feel bad for the guy, especially with the cancer diagnosis. I wish him nothing but a pleasant retirement. I hope that, he recovers quickly and comfortably. And I truly mean that from the bottom of my heart. I always felt so bad for Joe Biden during that campaign because he should not have been there. It was obvious. I don't know why the Democrats insisted on running with him. Maybe, to be fair, maybe they thought that it was going to present weakness, I suppose, but they ended up running Kamala anyway. And in hindsight's 2020, but I said this at the time. If they'd run a primary early enough, Joe Biden could have been a hell of a campaign force for the new nominee, no matter who they were. But because they waited so long and basically were forced to because Biden couldn't deliver thanks to the debate, it then looked like Biden was just getting stabbed in the back by the Democratic Party, and to a point he was. I mean, because he clearly seemed like he wanted to run, but somebody should have stepped in, and I mean they sort of did and said for the good of the country, but too little, too late. Could you imagine Democrats? If any Democrats are watching this, could you imagine if pick your candidate. It doesn't matter who it was because Biden could have been a huge campaign force for them. Biden could have been the sympathetic hero that just has to step down because age has finally caught up with him after 50 plus years of service. I mean, the message there and the idea of passing the torch to a younger, you know, that would have resonated so well with young voters, period, and Democrats as a whole. I think, personally, I think. And even people on the conservative side would at least have had to have respected the fact that, they were right and that he was cognitively declining, which the man's in his 80s. It's not a surprise. It's not like a 40-year-old losing it, and like it should surprise no one. Even Trump is slipping more and more because he's, in his late 70s. It happens to just about everybody. But imagine that. Wouldn't that have been? Certainly would have been a more compelling race. But alas, as usually happens throughout history, the gap between narrative and reality is finally starting to close. It's going to keep coming out, and people are going to have to keep coming out to save their own skin about how they knew all along, and you're going to see it. They gaslit the American people and didn't have the guts to come clean. And they're not even going to come clean, they're going to get found out because now the truth is coming out, it's surfacing, but the damage was done long before the truth came out. So I guess my closing idea would be for the Trump supporters watching this, try to have a little compassion for Joe because, like I said, the man's got cancer. And this wasn't, I don't even think this was a majority of his fault. And even if it wasn't solely his fault. There were clearly people, pushing him forward. In fact, possibly literally, because I had heard reports of some people suggesting they even, put him in a wheelchair to wheel him out if necessary. And there's going to be some really just icky stuff coming out. And for the Democrats watching this, I really hope that you guys, and I'm not trying to lump you all together, but I really hope that the stalwarts who are still defending Biden obviously not defending his health, but like defending the idea that Biden wasn't slipping. I hope you can at least admit that he was. It was obvious that he was. They should have done a different route. I know it's too little, too late, but just don't make the same mistakes if you want to win. And to be fair, and Larry again, hit me up. We're Average Intelligence Podcast on Instagram. I would very much like to have you on and have a discussion. Wow, completely lost my train of thought. Shiver should have pressure. Where was I going with that? Oh yes, I remember now. Got it. Come on, man. Because I know, and we brought this up a lot of times. I know it can seem like we're very pro-Trump. Not exclusively. Sometimes we do like what Trump does. This second administration, I've liked virtually none of it, and I have said so. My normal co-host Eric is a little bit more right-leaning than me, but it honestly does depend on the issue. I would consider both of us moderate. In fact, you can see my political positions. Last week's episode, I took two political, what would you call that, political compass test. The answer surprised even me a little bit because I actually have moved a little bit further to the left on some things. But my main point is I really do sincerely wish I could have put together a more polished episode for you guys, but unfortunately, we are not monetized yet. We've got plenty of subscribers, although subscribe if you haven't already, because we go live usually every week, Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we upload separate videos. And we don't just do politics, we do movie reviews, basically anything cultural. And people always say this is a political podcast, but as you saw in the intro, it's basically just a topical current events podcast. I apologize for my dog. She gets very loud. But I am asking very, very nicely, if you would please like the video, share the video with a friend or an enemy, doesn't matter. But more importantly, go back and watch some of our older episodes. Any of our episodes that you watch, there's going to be quite a few more like them. And it's also really fun for me because sometimes I go back and watch it as kind of a time capsule. It's a lot of fun. But as you can see, I'm yawning. I'm already very tired. Please help us get monetized by just watching our content. And we will be able to do this full time, hopefully one day, and we can put together much more polished episodes and more content. And we'll have anybody who wants to come on and debate us on because we are not afraid to discuss our views or to change our minds. Because at the end of the day, we don't really take ourselves too seriously. I mean, if you hadn't noticed yet, our logo is a chimp in a suit. And that's kind of the intro tells you all you need to know about this podcast. But join us next week. As I said, we're going to be reviewing the Karate Kid Legends. I'm going to go see it this weekend. And hopefully, I've heard it's good. I've heard it's pretty good, but we will see. And join us next week. And hopefully, we'll have Larry on the week after to have a friendly and spirited debate. And if not, we'll figure out something else to do. But until then, like, share, subscribe, and watch some of our old episodes, and we will see